you work with a lot of people who maybe built up a company as a dream. It's their baby in some ways. I mean, they've spent more time with their business probably than their wife or kids in a lot of times. And now all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, it's got to be worth something. I'm kind of getting tired of it. Either they want to retire, they want to make a career change, as Kevin was talking about just a few minutes ago. There must be a whole process by which somebody would sell a business. I mean, you can't necessarily just list it on Craigslist and see what happens. I suppose you could, but
I suppose you could list it on Craigslist or something of that nature, but it's probably not the best way to go. In terms of selling a business, it can be fairly complicated, as you might imagine. A lot of people, like you said, they have really invested a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money into their business. It's probably for a lot of business owners, the business itself is probably the biggest asset that they have. So selling it and getting the most for it is a very important thing. And right now we're getting a lot of baby boomers who are retiring on a regular basis. Supposed to be the numbers are like 10,000 baby boomers a day are turning 65 and retiring, so to speak, if they are in fact actually retiring.
So that they can then become a Walmart greeter in about 4 years after they run out of money, right?
Yes, exactly. And so there's going to be, over the next decade or so, there's going to be a lot of businesses changing hands. A lot of people are going to be trying to get out of their business. And there's a couple of ways to transition out. Certainly you could just leave everything by will, as we've talked about in the estate planning context, to your spouse or to your kids. But there's a lot of there's some fairly big reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. First, of course, is that you want to get money for your retirement, or you want to get a stream of income for your retirement. So that would be one reason why you would want to sell the business. And then of course, you might have, if you're lucky, you've got a real successful business. You probably have, you hopefully have an estate tax issue, because your assets are at a certain level, so where estate taxes do apply, and then you have to figure out how you're going to get those paid. You only generally have about 9 months to pay your estate tax after you pass away. So that might mean if you haven't planned properly or sold your business in advance of dying, you're going to have to fire sale that business and not get nearly what you should be getting for the business. So.
Now, when you're going to sell a business, I imagine it takes a team here, because there's valuation, there's, a successful transfer, there's there's a transfer of money, there's so many pieces of it. I imagine that the contracts can get pretty lengthy. Absolutely.
The contracts, and there can be multiple different documents putting things together. Literally, I have filled 3-ring binders, full 1.5 inch, 2 inch, 3-ring binders filled with documentation for deals, and anywhere from, and of course, naturally, everybody wants a 2-page contract that does everything
for $400.
For $400, right? The reality is that if you have, if you've got any complexity at all to what you're selling, that's just not going to be the case.
I found this Word document. It's a template.
Yes.
Can I use that, and will you make sure it's right? Like what?
Yeah, it's much cheaper, by the way, to just start with the attorney going, as opposed to pulling that off, filling it out, working with that, and then going to the attorney and having them go through and tear it apart and go, here's everything that's wrong, and now it's going to take me 10 hours to fix it.
Right.
I could have just spent the 10 hours in the first place to put it all together or whatever.
So what are some of those big components, that can go into a contract like this? And we were talking about like a non-compete a few minutes ago before we came on the air, but what are all the components that can go into this?
Yeah. Well, there can be, depending on the business, lots of components, but obviously the number one thing is going to be price. What is the price of the business? And like you're talking about, putting together a team. Your team should have, at a minimum, your attorney and probably your accountant. And your accounnt may be able to help with valuing the business.
The two people everybody loves paying.
Absolutely. But if there are certain circumstances where your team would need to expand. You might want to have your financial advisor involved at some point, and you may need a broker or a business valuation expert in order to help you value the business, or certainly market the business if you don't have a ready list of potential buyers. So you might need that type of individual. And valuing the business, unfortunately, is one of the hardest things because there is no real ready market. It's not like you know what Apple is trading at today, so you know what those shares are worth on the open market. It's a privately held business almost all the time that we're talking about, and then determining what it's worth is difficult. And so that's a large component, is determining the value. Of course, the market will determine the value, what somebody is going to pay. But there are other significant components too, and it can be the structure of the deal, and that's a real key component. If you're looking to get cashed out of the deal, that's great for the seller because there's very little risk involved. All the money all at once at closing, that's perfect. But that doesn't happen, all that frequently, especially if we're talking about millions of dollars. Most people, even companies, don't have millions of dollars just lying around to just plunk down on a new business. So it's going to be a down payment, and then you're going to get terms. And so, from the seller's standpoint, you want to be thinking about how you're going to get paid, what you're going to get paid over what time frame, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Generally, you don't want it to go over 7 years or something. Is there going to be a balloon payment? And what's going to work for both the buyer and the seller? And then if you're doing the seller financing, making sure you get paid is, of course, the key element.
Yeah,
from a legal
because there must be some inherent risk to selling your business if you're not getting all cash.
Yes, there's a tremendous risk because obviously your future income stream is dependent on somebody else owning and running your business successfully. And if they turn around in a year or two and run it into the ground and have no ability to keep making the payments on the promissory note, then what do you have? You got a whole lot of nothing, and that's going to dramatically affect your retirement or your family's inheritance and things like that. So making sure that you get paid by being protected, deeds of trust, securing real estate, security interests, securing personal tangible property, accounts receivable, things like that, personal guarantees. If a company is buying your company, getting personal guarantees from the owners, the actual individual owners, so that their personal assets can be exposed and on the hook. That's a greater impetus to make sure that they're going to pay and continue to pay and do those things because they know they can be maybe completely wiped out if they don't perform. So those are some of the things that the seller is really going to be wanting to demand and get in their favor if they're going to be, if that's going to be the case.
So huge reasons to hire someone like you, John. I mean, when it really comes down to it, there's so many places to try to legally protect yourself, especially as a seller.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing too, there are other aspects too. In addition to price and deal structure, you're going to be making certain statements about the business, just like you do in real estate. You've got disclosures about what's the scenario with any particular piece of real estate. Is there cracks in the foundations, problems with the plumbing, electrical, whatever it might be, and you have disclosures. We get the same disclosures for a business, and so you want to make sure that, first of all, it'd be good to be disclosing very positive aspects, solid contracts, long-term contracts, things like that. But if you have any problems, maybe you haven't filed a particular tax return or you haven't paid an outstanding state or local tax or something like that, you want to make sure that you disclose that and that it's addressed in the contract because you don't want that to surprise the buyer at a later point in time and then they have to pay something that's really your responsibility, and then they're suing you for breach of contract. So there's a number of additional things that the lawyer is going to be involved in terms of allocating risk and again protecting the seller's interests as best as possible.
So when you have your attorney helping you with all this, and of course this may be the transition to retirement, maybe it's a transition to another business. There's all different ways I suppose you're transitioning. That must play a big role in okay, well, what's my next step as the business seller?
Right. And that's, again, something that, and unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people think this through because so many people are focused on running the business and growing the business that thinking about the exit strategy continually gets put off. But you're right. Thinking about what you want to do next. Is it playing golf and traveling, or is it another business venture that you want to do, or is it charitable work? And then how much money do you need to make that happen? And is everything realistic in terms of achieving those different goals?
And how many entrepreneurs do you really know that have gone their whole life with, I mean, you guys are both business owners, I am. It's a little addicting, right? I mean, there's an adrenaline piece. Kevin's over there ready to retire right now. He's like, I had it anyways. But, I mean, there's a little bit of addictiveness to it. And I think that to wake up every morning after you've owned a business, is that something that people think about? Do you help people understand, like, look, I get it. I know you want to just go do nothing.
Right.
But then, as you said, 6 months later, I mean, people must be driving themselves crazy.
Well, yeah, and I think really what people want is the freedom to be able to do nothing. But when it comes right down to it, that's not what they actually do.
You can't do nothing.
Yeah, they probably do get bored, and although it's nice to play a round of golf every single day,
your back will hurt.
Your back may hurt, and so you may want to go and get into something. Something new, something fresh, and keep yourself engaged and whatnot. And
especially if you want to live longer. I mean,
exactly.
I know a lot of people, if they just shut down,
yes,
their health deteriorates as well. A lot of connectivity to that.
Right. There's a lot of older entrepreneurs that have basically said, well, if I'm not doing this, I wouldn't even be alive. I mean, there'd be like no reason for me to keep on breathing. Basically, it's what keeps them going. It's what keeps them getting out of bed every day. And if they're not actively productive in terms of their business, then they're just not. There's no point anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like even though the sale of a business, it's important how you do that. But I think what you're saying is, and I agree with you, is that you have to really structure the sale of your business to meet your tomorrow and what's going to happen the following week or the following week. Because, as you said, there's risk to maybe taking payments over time. There's risk to, if you get all the money up front, are you going to get as much as you would over time? There's so many ways you got to look at that sale.
Right, yeah. And certainly if you're looking to turn around and invest the proceeds into, say, a new business venture that you're looking at, or maybe you're looking to be sort of like an angel investor and sort of help other new businesses and stick $50,000 or $100,000 here, there, and everywhere into 10 different ventures. Certainly, if you're only getting $50,000 up front, you're not going to be able to realize that next step, that next dream. So then you're going to want more money up front. But if you're looking to retire comfortably, then you need to know, okay, well, what do I spend every month? And what am I looking at spending? Am I going to be spending $10,000 a month? Well, then I better make sure I structure the money coming in to be somewhere comparable to that, with, again, combining that with other sources of income that you may have from a 401k or from Social Security or whatever that might be. You don't want to go, okay, I got $10,000 worth of expenses, but I've structured my promissory note payments to be $4,000 a month for the next 20 years.
Right.
So I got a shortfall there. So yeah, what you want to do and how you want to go about doing it is a driving factor, and people should think about that in advance. And I think if they do, that'll really help them put their best foot forward when they're trying to do this.
We have less than a minute left, but I just want to ask you real quickly, how far in advance of the potential sale of a business should somebody start thinking about it? Because I've heard day one, hey, if you're going to start a business, in some ways you should have some idea of how you're going to get out of it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've heard that same thing. You should be thinking of your exit plan as you're putting together your business plan initially when you're starting your business. And I think that's a good idea. The reality is I don't really know much. Very many people.
Pretty tough to do. You're trying to build it, not get out of it.
Exactly. And so it's really tough for people to do. But I would say if you want to be smart about it, probably at least 6 months in advance of really starting minimum, and think about what you want and maybe learn about the process and start assembling your team. But anywhere from maybe 6 to 12 months.
Sure. Well, and then also you got to figure out, what is the buyer going to be looking for, right? Is it going to be revenue? There's so many different things a buyer will buy, right?
Exactly.
Is it users? Yeah. If it's software, is it revenue? There's also really understanding, I guess, your buyer and getting that duck in a row too would be important.
Without a doubt. And you do need to know what your buyer wants, what your buyer needs, what they're looking for, say rate of return on their investment and how that's going to work, And you so many different things to think about. Your own employees too. Are your employees going to be absorbed and continue to be working, or are they going to be laid off because of the potential buyer and whatnot? All kinds of different things to think about, and that's why you want to assemble your team and start the process and the thinking early.